We're going to get started with our keynote presentation here in just a minute. My name is John Stokes. I work for the City of Fort Collins Natural Areas Department, and it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today. Her name is Amy Beatty. What you need to know about Amy is she graduated from DU Law School. She clerked for Justice Hobbs, the legendary Justice Hobbs. She then was also in private practice, and then I believe back in around 2007, she became the executive director of the Colorado Water Trust. She's going to tell you all about the Water Trust, but it's a great organization that works throughout the state to help improve the health of our rivers and streams. The Water Trust has partnered with the City of Fort Collins, and I can tell you they are very smart, very energetic, very passionate people. They're great to work with, and Amy's going to share some of their success stories from around the state, and hopefully we can learn a little bit from the experience of the Water Trust around the state and bring some of those lessons home here to the Poudre River. So without further ado, Amy Beatty.
I'm really grateful to be here today to share some of the stories about community-based efforts to restore flows around the state and tie some of those pieces together and share some of our perspectives. I was a little bit shy when I was asked to give this keynote presentation for a handful of reasons, one of which is that the space that we occupy in this funky world of Colorado water and Colorado water law and allocation is through the focus of the environment. And the environmental water and the environment's voice in this conversation is playing catch up. You heard from Drew Beckwith from Western Resource Advocates earlier, and his group is known to say that we've been developing water for consumptive purposes and out-of-river purposes since the 1860s. So over 150 years of perfecting that craft, and then environmental water and environmental projects didn't really come online until 1973 with the adoption of the state's in-stream flow program. So, the folks at Western Resource Advocates talk about how the environment was kind of kept at the start line at a race, and everyone else was off and running and getting fitter and fitter, and then all of a sudden we were sort of released. So the environment in the conversation around water in the state of Colorado is playing a bit of catch up. Another reason is that we're a significant we at the Colorado Water Trust. We all bring various disciplines and expertise and dispositions to the table to accomplish the work that we do. So I really wish today you could hear from every person on my team, from a woman who worked with the state's in-stream flow program for over 20 years. She knows the clear paths forward. She also knows where the landmines are and a few of the bodies are buried. We have a person who came from a municipal context who was also a consultant, and she brings a very technical perspective. Zach Smith is here. He's our staff attorney. He's the legal brains behind the operation. And so we've got a lot of folks that are coming together to help create some environmental outcomes for the state of Colorado. Another thing that occurs to me is that we're in this, I was at also the Colorado Water Congress's annual convention in the last couple of days, and everyone has talked about how we are transitioning from an area of more stability into an era of uncertainty. And things are requiring incremental steps, baby steps, and a lot of patience, and working in the environmental water arena is no different. And then we live in that world of uncertainty in environmental water. I tell folks all the time that everything is busy. You come to work and during the day, your phone is ringing, emails are coming. I think lots of people can relate to how much input that you get during the day. And sometimes it matters to stop, that idea, don't just do something, stand there, stop, listen, and hear what everything is telling you. And we do that every so often at the Trust. So if you stop and you stand still, you can still feel the sand sort of shifting underneath you. So what you think is a great plan one day is influenced by change that comes online, small or great, and you have to be very nimble and figure out how to course correct. And then the other thing that I want to share is that making environmental water part of the conversation and balancing the playing field is this, similar to working in this era of uncertainty. It's also a step-by-step and very incremental process. We talk a lot in our office about this idea where you could, figure out what it is that's going to boil the ocean, or the thing that is your silver bullet solution. And our work is premised on the idea that you can boil one teacup at a time, and then eventually all of those teacups can come together to amount to a lot of hot water, but not the way that you're thinking. Eventually you get these small and reasonable successes to be sewn together to create greater outputs, bringing the work to scale. I also teased out a bunch of themes from looking at the material and listening to everyone this morning, and people need to come together to make change. People need to listen to each other. Community is incredibly important. You here have one river and many voices as represented by all of the different perspectives on rivers in this room. And so, our thinking is that when you join people together and don't divide people, you get the greatest outcomes, that you welcome everyone to the conversation. So with that, I want to share with you some ideas for today about how you can create conservation successes in the Poudre by looking at and drawing on some ideas that have occurred outside the state. But the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is, you all are a community, and you've decided to come together today on a cold Saturday to share ideas about how your community can come together and create a healthy river and a working river. And so why, as a community, should you care about water? Because water is community. It affects every aspect of your life: industry, agriculture, health, the environment, planning, development, you heard this morning. So water encompasses everything. Wayne Aspinall said, when you touch water in the West, you touch everything, and that's true. The other thing I want people to keep in mind is that you all may not be water experts, but you are community experts, and as community experts, you know what's going to work here. So bring your expertise as a person who rides his or her bike to work every day, or travels out into your fields every day. Water stops at your head gate and you figure out how to deliver it. You are a municipal water supplier, or you are the laundromat for water once it's made itself through a municipality and you're figuring out how to return it back to the river. Tie together all of those pieces that make you a member of your community and have a say about how your community works on water. The other thing I hear a lot is that the future of solving our water problems is this big, tough nut to crack. And Reagan said this morning, science may influence how we solve water problems, and we also have law and policy that function pretty heavily in that arena. But I also think the inquisitive person and the person who isn't afraid to ask questions and take risk and involve themselves in the conversation is going to be able to help us explore new ideas, question why, and even make mistakes because we learn from them. And so with all of that in mind, what I'm going to share with you are folks that spent some time thinking about how we can do things differently, how partnerships matter. They're not all water experts. These are people who had an idea and ran with it because they realized that we do truly want to see statewide this idea that rivers can be healthy and working at the same time. So what I'm going to share with you are what I call 5 homegrown strategies, and it says in the materials that these are all water trust partnerships. They're not. I actually wanted to share with you some of the tools and resources that are being developed around the state, because I think you guys are at a point, at this absolutely perfect point, where I want to say you're sort of teetering at the precipice, but you all are very ripe to try and figure out how to make your river do what you want it to do and serve all of your needs. And so I'm hoping that you can take these anecdotes and bring them back to your work every day and create the river that you all want to see as a collective and shared vision for your river. The first strategy is something that we worked on with the city of Aspen, and it's actually called a non-diversion agreement, an NDA. We like our acronyms in the water world. So this was a Water Trust and Aspen partnership. It was a private effort to restore flows on the Roaring Fork River. So the partnership is between the city of Aspen. Aspen is a diverse community and a world-class summer and winter destination resort. It sits at 7,800 feet, and it was founded in 1880 during the silver mining boom. And over the years, Aspen has seen times of thriving and hardship, just like the river that runs through its backyard. Aspen's municipal government has a charge of meeting really diverse needs, and in a community that also has very strong environmental values. They were naturally partnered with us, a private nonprofit formed in 2001. Our mission is to use markets and voluntary and win-win and willing participant models to restore stream flows throughout the state. So it's an everybody is welcome type model. The Roaring Fork begins at 12,000 feet on the west slope of the Continental Divide. It travels 70 miles. It drops 5,800 vertical feet, ending in the Colorado River. The character of the river changes a lot, and the uses of the river change a lot as it travels to the Colorado River. One of the things to keep in mind about the river is that it is subject to drought, transbasin diversions, local water uses, and changing environmental conditions, and those have resulted in a reduction of stream flow through the city of Aspen, and at sometimes the city of Aspen sees 10% or less of the native flow of the river. In fact, in 2002, Aspen has an annual ducky race where you write your name on the bottom of a rubber duck and you put it in the river, and folks fish it out of the river to see who's won the duck race. And in 2002, kids were throwing their ducks from pool to pool in the river, and people were doing bucket brigades of fish out of holes in the river to move them to better habitat. So the idea was, during drought circumstances, understanding that Colorado water law functions in a way that is that doesn't consider environmental outcomes. It is fine under Colorado water law to move as much water out of river for out of river uses so that there's nothing left in the river. There's nothing illegal about that. That is the structure we work within. So our charge is to find whatever solutions that we can that are cooperative and voluntary that can restore flow to rivers. So what we try to use is that we try to use fairly conventional tools in really creative ways. In March of 2013, we'd been working in conversation with Aspen for years about what we could do with them to help restore flow to the section of river through town. We brought our water rights staff and expertise to their knowledge of their water rights and matched together a brainstorming session where we looked at their water rights portfolio, and they decided they were willing to use one of their water rights creatively to leave water in the river through a section of town. Once we identified the water right, we also then looked at all of the tools available. We made a matrix. The matrix included everything from the how to move water back into the river, all the way to what risk Aspen would see from moving water back into the river. And notably, in that matrix, there was not a blank spot in the column of risk for any of the tools. Every one of the tools carries some measure of risk with it. So at the end of the day, Aspen was deciding, what risk do we want to bear, and what is the environmental outcome that we can get from moving forward with a project? So, and what we decided was a private, flexible agreement that did not go through a formal transfer process, where Aspen simply decided to leave a water right in the river that they would use for other municipal purposes under other circumstances, was the right way and the smoothest way forward for them, that also carried the lowest risk. This kind of agreement is a voluntary commitment by a water user, and it does not require any sort of formal process. A lot of people talk about how it's hard to move water in the state of Colorado, and that it's expensive, and that you have to go through multiple systems, either administrative or even water court. And so the idea with this project was to be nimble and as flexible as possible. So this is actually a hydrograph that shows the implementation of the 2013 non-diversion agreement. The green is the increase in stream flow from the reduction of diversions at Aspen's Wheeler Ditch, and the blue is flow in the river. That dotted red line is the CWCB's decreed in-stream flow, the minimum amount necessary to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree. You can see that the river dipped below that minimum in-stream flow. So the green isn't saving the river. The green isn't a ton of water on top of the river. But what that green shows you is leadership, creativity, willing to accept risk, and starting a process and trying to kind of create or catalyze change in the Roaring Fork Basin. So the green may not have saved the river had the river flatlined, but the idea is that Aspen actually put that green back in the river because it said, yes, we want to. They had to make adjustments to their municipal operations. They made adjustments to their headgate. They made adjustments to deliveries of irrigation water rights. They invoked a provision in some contracts for some outdoor irrigation saying, hey, not this year. Everybody has to share in our helping the river. And they even reduced the use of their pedestrian fountains in the heart of the city. So they made sacrifices in order to make this kind of project work. And then we also talked to them in 2014. The snowpack was looking good, drought or not. That last agreement was a one-year agreement, and they said, let's look at it again, and maybe let's just get it queued up and ready to go so that if we do see our flows dropping, then we can actually implement this agreement again. And the idea was also that if we implemented it again, we could have conversations to bring new people to the table. We asked for some projections about what the river might look like. So this is from a consultant who said, here are our general projections for flow this year, despite the high snowpack. It still looks like the river is going to dip below that 32 CFS, so let's rock this agreement out again. And so Aspen said, we'll be proactive, we'll get this agreement queued up again, and then sure enough, on August 21st in 2014, the river dropped below 32 CFS, and that's the trigger for the agreement, and they went into all of their operations to leave water in the river. The second strategy that I wanted to share with you is Winter Park Ranch Water and Sanitation District. In 2012, during the drought, the Colorado Water Trust let water users know that we were available to help them analyze their water rights portfolios and move water back into rivers through a more formal transfer mechanism. And Winter Park Ranch Water and Sanitation District said, let's figure this out. They're a local district that serves a small resort community with a water rights portfolio of wells, irrigation rights, and augmentation water. They partnered with us and also this time with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, who is the only entity in the state of Colorado that can hold water rights for in-stream flow. So in a transfer like this, we are involving a state agency, a private water user, and us, and each of those parties plays a different role on how water can be transferred for environmental flows. Something to note about the Fraser River. This transaction occurred on the Fraser River. It's approximately 32 miles long. It drains a large part of Middle Park Basin in Grand County. I think most folks know that 60% of the native flow of the Fraser River comes across the Continental Divide and serves uses on the Front Range. It leaves only about 40% of water for local uses. Temperature and water quality issues come along with that dewatering. So water treatment actually became an issue for the Winter Park Ranch Water and Sanitation District. Dilution is the solution to pollution. I know lots of you folks hear that. Well, they were dependent upon higher flows to dilute their effluent discharge into the river, and as flows were diminishing, they ended up having to build a $9 million new treatment plant in order to address the diminishing flows that they had because they couldn't meet their water quality permits. So the need for that is both because of the diversions, but also because of local practices. So there is no finger pointing here. It's just a reality, a practical reality of how our system works. I actually quoted Kirk Clanky here. I don't know if you all know him, but he is a true river advocate. He wears many, many hats. He has to provide water, he has to clean water, he has to figure out how to deal with diminished flows in his local river. And through all of those obligations of his job, he's also an incredible river advocate, and he's a trout bum. So he loves the fishing component of the Fraser River, and he also loves the Fraser River's deep history of a recreation environment. And you saw the photo that I showed at the beginning of this strategy. It was a statue of somebody fishing in the river. That's actually Eisenhower. Our 34th president spent so much time in the Fraser River because of a ranch that was owned by friends of his that they called the Fraser River and that cabin where he stayed the Western Office of the White House. So the tool that we used was what we call a 3-in-10 lease with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. And let me actually also share with you, something is wrong with the format here. I did not choose a font that actually looks like it came from the early 1970s. So I keep looking at this, and there are also a few typos embedded in it. So we'll need to figure out why it's a little bit glitchy, and it looks like it's waiting for you to type some code. That was not intentional. In any event, we used with Winter Park Ranch something called a short-term lease. This is a lease that can be used for 3 out of 10 years. and can never be used again. So you put the water right in the program, and it's a very short-term solution. So it's perfect for drought, because if you have drought and it hangs around for a couple of years, you can run one of these projects for 3 out of a 10-year period, but then you can never use the water right for these short-term purposes again. You need to look at long-term solutions. It can only be used in concert with a decreed in-stream flow that must be water short. It's an administrative approval process, not a litigation process, so you have a lot more quickness and flexibility in the process. And again, the water can't be used in the program after 10 years. Winter Park Ranch looked at 2 irrigation water rights on St. Louis Creek and decided that if they put those water rights back in the river, they would improve the habitat in the river. St. Louis Creek is heavily fished, it's got public access, and they would also improve their dilution potential in the river. So they went through this transfer process with the Water Trust and the Colorado Water Conservation Board to satisfy the 2 in-stream flows, the first 2 in-stream flows that you see listed up there. This is what the approval looks like. It comes from the state engineer's office. It's a letter that says, hey, you can do that. Here are your terms and conditions. And the photo is a photo of one of the head gates of the irrigation water right that they put in the program. And so what's next in this conversation? And I also wanted to mention what's next in the conversation in Aspen. Both of these activities were small, a 3 and 10 lease, a 1-year non-diversion agreement that was implemented again. But the incredible energy that has come around the leadership of both these communities and both these folks whose job does not include environmental water provider has spawned lots more conversations about what can be done both in the Fraser and in the Roaring Fork. In the Roaring Fork, we've had some unusual folks come to us and say, we have environmental water, we're trying to figure out how to use it, or we have supply in a reservoir and we're trying to figure out how to use it. Hey, you worked with Aspen, and we want to see that section of river restored also, so come and visit with us to help us figure out how we put more and more water together to put back in the river. And that's the same on the Fraser. The leases on the Fraser, there were a few local landowners who said, how cool, maybe we could give up some of our water too and see if we can restore flows to the Fraser. So leadership at even the smallest level goes a very long way towards creating solutions to environmental problems that are at scale, that actually address the problem that you're looking at. Strategy number 3, I'm going to kind of move away from the nuts and bolts water strategies, and I'm going to talk more about other levers that you can pull. In Colorado water, you can try and find that giant lever that everyone's hands are on and pull it and make really big change. That's a new statute. That's a statewide fund for funding environmental water projects. But you can also pull lots of small levers and have pulling those small levers add up to success, and success at the community level, but it can also create ideas for success at a broader scale. So one of the things I wanted to share with you is a project that the Telluride Foundation in San Miguel County has been working on. The Telluride Foundation was founded in the year 2000. It was formed to promote philanthropy and improve the quality of life for the folks in the Telluride region, both visitors and residents. They develop and support initiatives, but they also make direct investments. They're a very, very active community foundation. They are the 4th most active grant maker as a % of asset size, and they are the 3rd in terms of spending per capita for the jurisdiction that they sit in. In cooperation with a group of folks to do a diversion structure modification project on the lower San Miguel, we asked the Telluride Foundation for funds. They helped support the project. The project was successful, and what they ended up realizing was collaborative and community-based projects to help restore flows in rivers can also be sparked not just through good leadership and good partnerships, but also by local funds. And so they decided that they wanted to try and bring this idea of this one small project more to scale in the San Miguel Basin. So what they did was together with us, they came to us and said, help us create a marketplace. Help us create a way that we can tailor our funds towards environmental water outcomes. They're not experts in environmental water. They have there are 3.5 people doing the work at that very busy foundation. They support the arts. They support a hockey rink. They help with public projects, the library, social services. And so they're trying to build this space where they can also help create an environment for environmental flows in the San Miguel River. And so essentially what they said was, we want to fund these projects. You all receive funding, you all have helped fund projects, and you all have managed your own projects. Partner with us and help us figure out how to create an annual fund that would go towards flow restoration projects. And we're in the middle of working through that with them. Strategy number 4 is the Pitkin County Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund. This is, to my knowledge, the only fund of its kind. They relied on a statute that has been in the books that said counties can impose a tax up for purchasing, adjudicating changes of, or leasing, or using, or banking and selling water rights for use within the county. And so they said, well, heck yeah, why wouldn't we try that out? So Pitkin County went ahead and ran Referendum 1A. And I want you to note that this passed in 2008. So this was a time when we were in the middle of a major presidential election. The economy was cratering. Everyone was saying no to new taxes. I mean, there are statistics across the board that said any tax initiative, they resoundingly failed, and this one resoundingly passed. I think it passed by something in the high 70th percentile. And the idea behind the tax was to create a sales tax of 0.1% to establish a Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund. There were 5 specific objectives for the fund: maintaining and improving quality and quantity of the water within the Roaring Fork watershed, purchasing water rights, moving water in order to benefit the Roaring Fork watershed, working to secure, create, and augment minimum in-stream flows, protecting the ecological health, recreation opportunities, and wildlife and riparian habitat, promoting water conservation, and working on any kind of structural project that will facilitate the 4 things above. And so they're up and running. The referendum passed, the funds started coming in, they created a board to manage the fund, and now you can submit grants to that fund in order to work on water projects that meet those criteria that I just listed for you. So the Healthy Rivers and Streams Fund is another way that you can, that Pitkin County decided that they would figure out a way to incentivize projects right in their backyard. I didn't want you all to feel left out because there is magic going on in the Poudre River Basin. Also, there are lots of incredible ideas and energy and enthusiasm, and so I'm going to share with you, do I have time? A really quick video about a project that the Water Trust worked on with the city of Fort Collins, and I didn't realize what a nerd I was until I saw this thing, so I hope you all will think it's fun and lighthearted, but I'm aware I'm kind of a nerd. I'm Amy Beatty. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Water Trust. The Colorado Water Trust mission is to restore and protect stream flows using voluntary and market-based mechanisms. We were very naturally matched up with the city of Fort Collins, which had been acquiring riparian lands and working on reconnecting the Cache-la-Poudre River with the floodplain. One of the things about the Cache-la-Poudre River that we learned really quickly is that this is a heart and soul asset for the community around the city of Fort Collins. This diversion structure was actually abandoned. It was abandoned in the 70s when the water rights decreed to it were transferred to other uses. It's not being used anymore, but it creates a significant flow barrier. It's a sediment trap.
The diversion structure has really backed up the water and made the river channel unnaturally wide, really mucky, slow moving for this whole long stretch.
And the basic idea is to restore a half-mile stretch of the Poudre River, including 5 acres of wetland restoration, stream bank restoration, and the removal of the Ames diversion structure.
We worked to knit our project into the cities so that the removal of the diversion structure and the city's habitat restoration could come together really nicely.
These areas up and down the Front Range of Colorado are becoming more and more imperiled. Habitat destruction in these areas has been pretty high. A whole variety of partners are coming together to make this project happen.
All the local breweries all came together to form the Northern Colorado Brewery Water Conservation Group. Water is the most important part to our beer. Conserving it is extremely important to us.
So here's a great example of the steep berm that we'll be removing as part of this project. It's 10 to 12 feet all along here. And in a natural system, this berm wouldn't be here at all. So we're going to lower this whole berm and have that connection for the river back with its floodplain.
When these floodwaters come up, they can spread out, distribute nutrients, create better habitat.
What the process of removing this structure is going to look like, we'll do some water management to get machinery in the river, and we're just going to chomp away at the diversion structure. We're going to remove concrete, rebar, chomp that structure all the way down so you won't be able to see it anymore. The river is going to feel like a more functioning river. It's going to be a happier place for fish.
This is good for wildlife, animals of all types that move up and down this river corridor.
If somebody wants to work with us, they can. We're a do tank, we're not a think tank. We like to do work that helps rivers. You feel a sense of freedom when a river is let free. Chomp, chomp, chomp is a technical term on page 22 of the manual. Yeah, okay, so what does all this mean for you guys? I thought about themes and how you can tie these pieces together and what I would tell you as a community so that you guys can keep doing the incredible work that you're doing. There is ripeness all up and down the river to support environmental flows. Your incredible Poudre River runs through it. Dialogue has produced a ripeness that I think is unmatched anywhere else in the state. You have the right people at the table. You've created a forum that people can come to. I listened to Jennifer Pitt yesterday at the Colorado Water Congress's annual convention talking about the pulse flow that restored flow to the Colorado River Delta. And one of the things that she said was, as an NGO, they lacked a forum in an international conversation for a place to go to put their energy. And so without the state talking, without the United States talking to Mexico, the NGOs didn't have a place to come into the conversation, to bring resources to the table, to move people off of the places that were causing the problem in the first place. And so in a lot of ways, what you have formed through your Poudre River Runs Through It forum is a place to come together where your voice can be heard. So do that, use it, it's very important. A few other things I wanted to share with you. So what's in your future? Experiment, act, try, fail. You never know what your outcomes are going to look like. The Winter Park Ranch transaction, the first year that we ran that transaction, we needed an in-stream flow, existing in-stream flow that was water short. We went through all of the processes to get that lease up and running for formal in-stream flow protection, and that window opened for 1 day. So there was 1 day's worth of use of that lease for formal in-stream flow protection. They didn't actually divert the water, so the water stayed in the river, and it had the incidental benefit of staying in the river, but being formally protected for stream flow. That window opened for only 1 day. Our best projections are exactly that. They're projections. Life isn't full of certainty. If it were, we would know much better how to solve the problems that are in front of us. But try, experiment, act, put things on the ground, and don't be afraid to fail. Small steps equal big leadership. Big leadership opportunities. So just taking one small step forward, as imperfect as it was, the tiny little green amount of water on top of the big old roaring fork, even though it's dropping below the in-stream flow, that has the potential to generate a significant amount of more water in the river, because what the city of Aspen said to itself was, we're going to take some leadership and figure out how to solve some of our own problems in the context of these big, weighty conversations that are going on around the state. Mary Lou mentioned something today that I think is super important in the water community. We immediately go to the details. When somebody has said, find someone who can go and talk to folks all around the state on behalf of your organization. And one of the things I learned is nobody stays up here at 50,000 feet. Everyone gets right into the details and right into the ways that you can't get things done. And we're, at least at the Water Trust, our engine is driven not by we can't because, but we can if. And we find that we can if all day, every day. And it's out there, and have faith and be persistent, because we can if is there. Just figure out how to find it. Talk to each other. Listen to each other. and be really, really curious. And for the folks that are experts, leave your expertise at the door sometimes. Walk into a conversation and leave that expertise at the door and say, I want to hear what these folks have to say, and I want to hear a different perspective. Outside the box thinking can change the status quo with everyone willing to come together to say, how can we do this? And the other thing for the folks that aren't experts is leave fear at the door, the fear of being wrong, the fear of saying the wrong thing, the fear of asking a funny question. Just don't worry about the context or the forum. If you have an idea, who knows? It could be the next best idea that can bring this work to scale, but if you don't say anything, nobody's going to know that you had the idea. And if the idea fails, God, I can't tell you how many ideas are on the cutting room floor in our office. Throw stuff out there. Have an ethic of throwing stuff out there and just letting see what things rise to the surface. And the other thing that I think is really important is find the right people to do the work with you. So I mentioned at the Trust that we all work together really well, but we don't also work in a vacuum. We work with an absolutely marvelous board of directors that helps guide us every day with the work that we're doing. We have incredible consultants like Caroline Bradford, who can raise money. She's a sort of ice to Eskimos kind of person who can raise money like nobody's business. We've worked with marvelous partners like the City of Fort Collins and Winter Park Ranch and the City of Aspen and the Telluride Foundation. And so you're not in this stuff alone. The conversation with the Telluride Foundation wouldn't be successful. They know how to fund. We know how to do water projects. We're marrying those two ideas together. Marry ideas together. I like to say that I love hearing what other people have to say. I come to most conversations with a degree of humility because there's so much stuff out there that we can't know. And every year I think, I can't believe my board of directors let me make decisions last year because now I know how much less I knew last year. But just keep, find your Sherpa, find your guide, find that person who can help you, partner, take you along the path that you don't know how to go along. That can go a really long way towards success. And then the other thing I want to leave you with is I think this is a community that does all of those things already quite well. So what you all are going to need to focus on is how to amplify those efforts. Thank you. Sure. The question was, would I speak briefly to my experience clerking for Justice Hobbs? What an incredible honor and privilege. Justice Hobbs treats his law clerks like family. He continues to get us all together. He's created an incredible community of practice. We have people that are working in bankruptcy, in water, in DC, at the policy level, and all of us feel as though we're part of the Justice Hobbs family. I also think most of you know that he's retiring at the end of this session. There will be a change in an era in the state of Colorado. Whatever you think about his opinions as a Supreme Court justice, he has shaped the way we view ourselves as a state. Who else gets to say that a tent is a home? Clerking for Justice Hobbs was totally wild. There are a few things that the deliberative process is not something that we can share. The judiciary is uniquely isolated and needs to be. It needs to have the briefs that come before it through a formal process that says what can and can't be shared, be the record on which they make their decisions. I can't share a lot about the deliberative process because it needs to be, the judiciary needs to be insulated from pressures and political pressures. But one thing I can tell you is that I think the man is an octopus. I've never met anybody who was able to get more done with the 24 hours that we are given in a given day than Justice Greg Hobbs of the Colorado Supreme Court. And when I clerked for him, he would come into the office and he'd be carrying 4 or 5 of those reusable grocery bags. And in one bag was his poetry, and in another bag was a law review article he was working on, and in another bag was this statewide initiative he was helping launch, and then in the last bag was the briefing for the thing that was right before him. He is totally amazing, and I think has touched everyone's lives in the state of Colorado in a way that can't be matched.